Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, both here in the chamber and online. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the City Council on this Tuesday, January 17th at 7:15 p.m. or 7:18 p.m. Sorry, we're a little late. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. And Craig, since you're handy, would you lead us? Thank you. Our next item on our agenda this evening is our communications from the public. We have no public hearings this evening, so anything is game. Any member of the public wishes to talk to the council, please step forward and state your name for the record.
Mary Flowers, Citizens for a Better Flathead, 135 South Main in Kalispell. Couple of things. One, in regards to the workshop that you just held, there's never enough time to discuss these things, and I understand you will possibly discuss it at the end of your meeting today a little bit, but I would really encourage you to bring it back for a workshop where the public can also look at another version of this before you send it to the council for final approval. So if there's opportunity to do another workshop, I think that would be helpful to the public. The second item, and I haven't had a chance to talk with Craig today, but as you know, we run the Waste Not Project, which offers school class presentations on waste reduction and recycling, and then we have our compost facility at the Flathead Valley Community College where we offer field trips to students to learn about soils and composting, etc. It would be nice to get an update and to stay in touch, and I'm not sure if during your public comment you can reference where you are on moving forward with a recycling site. That would be helpful for us to know. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other member of the public wish to speak this evening? Anybody online, Michelle? Okay, with that, I'll close our communications from the public at this time and move on to any communications from any volunteer boards. Any volunteer boards in the audience? Any volunteer boards on the council that wish to report this evening? Not seeing any. I think we can move on. We next have our consent agenda. I would entertain a motion and any amendments if anybody sees any.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
And the only edit I would have is that the agenda should have my name as present for and involved at the special session last meeting. With that, all those in favor? All those opposed, like sign. That matter passes unanimously. We have no public hearings this evening. Next, we have our communications from our city manager, Dana.
Good evening. Really brief update. The Montana legislative session is off to a whirlwind of a start with bills scheduled at hearings very frequently. I spoke on behalf of the city at Senate Bill 142 regarding impact fees yesterday. I did send out the link to the City Council if you'd like to watch that hearing and our comments. We also submitted written comments as well and opposed that bill. Tomorrow I'll be speaking in support of Senate Bill 145, which actually would take an allocation of the state's lodging and facility use tax that is retained by the state right now and reallocate that to cities for property tax relief. And so it would be based on the collections that actually occur within your jurisdiction. So that would be a great for our citizens to be able to have that relief. They account for it well within our mill levy calculations to ensure we continue to have the same ability to levy taxes, and it does not impact the amount that is going to the CVB. We also have one that we submitted comments on today that has a hearing tomorrow. I'll be unable to attend, but it is a Senate Bill 159. It is not in my report, and it is one that would exclude trails, paths, and other ways for walking, hiking, bicycling, path connections, and open space for parks from eminent domain. And while we don't typically use eminent domain, it is an important tool for cities as we grow and ensuring that we have multimodal means of transportation. So we did submit comments in opposition to that bill. And then tomorrow, Robin, our lobbyist, will be speaking on behalf of the city for Senate Bill 206 that would limit voted levies to 5 years. If you recall, we have a permanent voted levy for our fire department for 24 mills that was approved by our voters to fund us going to a 24/7 service, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This bill would limit all levies to 5 years. And so it would remove the ability to have a permanent levy. It would remove the ability to even have a 10-year levy. So it would also require a 50% voter turnout to have that be passed. And so we are in opposition of that bill. There's a similar bill out there as well. That one has yet to be scheduled, but we will be speaking in opposition to that as well. We are absolutely on the defensive during this legislative session, but when there are good bills that are great for our community, like Senate Bill 145 that is sponsored by Senator Regier, we will support those bills. So that is all I have for you.
Great. Any questions for Dana on her staff? Back up.
If SB 145 did pass, how much money do you think we would bring into the city? Any rough ideas?
I do not actually have that. There'd probably be a way to extrapolate that from what the CVB receives, but I haven't done that work yet. So
Okay.
as we get further down the process, if it gets out of committee and gets through some of the processes, we can calculate that as an estimate.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dana? Dana, anything occurring between the 11th and the 17th that you need to tell us about other than that?
Nope. That's my life.
That's great. Any other matters from staff at this point? Do we wish to have a further discussion as a group on, okay, we won't do that now then.
Frank,
Yeah.
I did think of one thing, and just to provide Mary with her question. The central recycling site, just as a reminder, is put on hold until the animal-resistant containers are fully rolled out. We are getting close. It's not been a smooth transition, but we are still working on that.
Right.
We will revisit the idea of a central site at the wastewater treatment plant when that process is complete. And probably our staff needs just a minute to breathe right after that.
No, yeah, they
Yep.
clearly need a moment to breathe.
Yep, thanks.
So, good, okay. Okay,
I think it's for Craig. So it's mostly in the older part of town in the avenues. People are leaving their bear-resistant containers out in the alleys all the time. Is that what we're going to aim for, or are they supposed to find a place on their own property to bring them closer to the house? Do you have any ideas? So instead of like the large 300-gallon ones, 3 of them on an alley, now we have numerous little ones?
Correct, yeah, and we're permitting that as long as they're not obstructing, ingress and egress through the alley. The issue that the driver is running into is that some people are stacking all of the containers in one specific location, and they need to be at least 4 feet apart in order to grab them. But we were anticipating some of those, staying in the alley. Others are bringing them in if they have a garage or have a fence or want to bring them in, but we anticipated they would remain, for the most part, in the alley.
So what I saw in my neighborhood is most people, before we bear-proofed, they would bring them out for the night of, or the morning of the pickup, and then take them back into their carport or near their house, which was probably better from a bear proofing standpoint, because then the bears aren't triggered to see all that food waiting for them as they walk down the streets visually, you know. But don't think we need to go towards that in other parts of the city.
Well, it wasn't staff's intention that I'm aware of.
So
If
our
it's
rule,
council's direction, we can move in that direction.
our rules still apply where the container needs to be pulled away from the right-of-way. Now, that has always been just the line. Our right-of-way line and a property line might look like it's still the alley. And so the only requirement we had that this container fixes is that now you can consider it as enclosed in a bear-resistant container. You no longer have to put it in your garage with a regular container. So they can't, they technically are supposed to pull it away from the right-of-way, but that can be right at your property line.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Councilor comments? Okay, great. With that said, I think we're at communications from mayor and city councilors. And just because I'm a right to left kind of guy, Giuseppe, would you like to start us off this evening? No comment. Okay. Steve?
I do think we need to give, Dave at least some initial direction, don't we, Dave, for the annexation policy? And I think we're mostly on the right track with what we have, at least from my perspective. I'm sure can probably hear from everybody. In terms of streamlining the process, I think we can make a decision about whether it still goes through the planning board another day. But in terms of putting what you have together, there might be some discussion of details as to what's in the criteria, but overall, I'm pleased with the direction we're heading with the annexation policy at this point. And then, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then just in terms of to provide direction regarding the Go Gallatin presentation, I think to me, it looked like that the Go Gallatin thing is a platform where it's not an increase in busing or anything. It's just a platform where you can go and find a ride if you become a member, basically. It's what it looks like, which I don't think is a bad thing, and I would like us to start getting down that path of trying to figure out some alternatives to transportation to make it easier for people to ride share in our community. And with that, in partnering with all of the different people in the community could not go wrong in terms of working together to help solve everyone's transportation problem, because it's not just a transportation problem here. I drive to Kalispell every day, and it has turned into a raceway to get down there every morning. So anyway, those are my thoughts about those things.
Yeah. Let me just kind of inject myself in this mess. Not a mess, but Dave, given what we saw this evening and given some of the feedback we got this evening from public and from staff, from us, do you think it would be appropriate for us to have another work session to go over any revisions, changes, or details that before we bring it in terms of drafting an actual resolution or code amendment?
I mean, the code amendment's pretty simple. Not a lot in that. I mean, I think we can bring that forward with your direction, as well as the annexation policy, and you'll have an ample opportunity to provide additional feedback through that process. There's, the zoning text amendment will have to go to the planning board first and then come to you guys, but yeah.
Okay. So the answer is yes, we need one. No, we don't need one.
Another work session?
Yeah.
I mean, this is already the second one on basically the exact same topic.
Right.
I mean, unless you guys have some substantive changes you would like us to make based on, tonight's work session, then we might, want to review that from, just what I've just heard you guys discussing it. It doesn't sound like anything too substantive. But if and we haven't heard from all the counselors, but if there is, bigger changes, we could obviously schedule another work session if you guys want one and you feel like you need to hash more of this out. But really just looking for your direction, and we're willing to bring this forward as quick as we can once we, get your head nod to do so.
Council, what is your feeling? Do you want another work session on this, or do you not? Or do you feel like we can manage the problems or any changes through the normal legislative process, I'll call it? Yes? Yes, Dan?
I'd just like to give you a heads up, we do not have any work sessions available till March 6th, so there would be a delay. We know that there are annexation requests coming forward. So I do think that, if there's a way to work on it tonight, or even if we do it as an item on an agenda, a work session is probably not the right place.
Okay. I like your thinking. I'm okay with that.
It feels to me like this is close enough that,
We
and
can-
important enough to bring it forward.
I agree. Everybody, okay? So let's proceed forward, Dave, and as you're bringing it forward, at least take into account some of the things we heard this evening, and when you make that proposal. Okay? Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Specifically, Dave, Mary Flowers gave us the annexation by petition. It's MCA 7-2-406 through 76, rather than 76-2-303. And I'd like you just to look at that, like why, if it might free us up from not being bound to what the county already is zoned as, and if it would give us more flexibility to design what we want to see. So I'll give you this piece of paper that she gave us. And then if you could just research that and get back with us if it's an improvement on what we're already doing.
Rebecca, I will say that the majority of our annexations are annexations by petition. We very rarely, the only other annexations we have done, to the best of my knowledge since I've been here, are wholly surrounded annexations. So most of our annexations do go through the annexation by petition. There are people asking us to annex in. So just a little background.
And then the only other thing, if that 76-2303 is what gives us the authority to do the truncated process, to streamline it.
Okay.
And so, and it really says the same thing that our policy already says.
So it's not any advantage to change that. Okay, thank you for telling us that. And then also, were you going to get back with us about whether or not we were going to charge someone for late hookups, for impact fees and all that for?
I can let Craig speak to that, but I think we could probably do some research in the meantime, since it's going to take a few months for the text changing
Okay.
of the zoning to get forward. We can make a recommendation as staff of what we think that surcharge might be.
Okay. And then I think in your report you mentioned the housing goals. Mary thought that maybe that should be fleshed out a little bit in terms of what incentives we're looking for, but I don't know if that's something that you think we need to include. We already have goals set through the community housing process, but those are the only things I took note of during the work session that I think we might need to have more information. But otherwise, I'm okay with just bringing it back to council.
Yeah. Legislation gets messy when you do it that way, but I like it.
I think it's more complicated than that, and it almost seems like maybe somewhere in the purpose of this document, kind of like we have in our growth policy, it could articulate a little more about why we annex or why it benefits our citizens, because I think ultimately that's the decision that we're trying to make, is this is benefiting our citizens. And I think right now it talks a lot about technical matters, but just the philosophy of it. I think if it said something about that in there, I think it'd be helpful for me. And I think whenever we have this conversation in a public hearing, I think starting from that premise of why do we do this, I think is a good place to be. In other matters, I think, personally, I think the conversation about the county zoning, obviously I'm still have an open mind about it, but it feels like if there's a conflict between county zoning and our own growth planning, I have no idea why the county zoning would take precedence over our growth planning. And then I also think that annexations should go to the planning board. I think that's a good idea. So that's my feedback, but I do think that this is an important change. I appreciate the work that's been done. I think this is a lot better than where we are today, so I look forward to getting this passed. Thanks.
Rebecca, anything further?
Yep, one thing I'm bringing that I've discussed with our city manager is this letter that I received from the Department of Public Health and Human Services. And it's just a clarification of the Montana Clean Indoor Air Act. And they say that e-cigarettes and vaping products are not considered smoking in public locations. But we're supposed to have signage to prohibit smoking, which includes marijuana. And so I talked to Dana, and she thought we should actually write up a policy. Do you want to speak to that, or Dana?
Basically, what's come of this letter is that the Clean Indoor Air Act does not include vaping or e-cigarettes. It does include the smoking of marijuana or smoking of tobacco. And so there are local jurisdictions in the state that prohibit the use of e-cigarettes or vaping within public buildings. That said, businesses can also make that choice to prohibit e-cigarettes and vaping. They can use that signage that was provided by the Department of Health and Human Services that includes vaping and e-cigarettes. But technically, if you don't have those rules for your business, or it's not a local jurisdiction rule, you should be just using the regular ones that say no smoking. And so basically, if the council so chooses to move forward with an ordinance that would prohibit smoking, a use of vaping or e-cigarettes in public buildings, I'd like to see a hand raise of all the council supporting us moving forward with drafting such ordinance. I will say that during this legislative session, there is a draft bill out there that would allow private businesses to make the decision to go to having smoking inside again, as long as there are no individuals that are under the age of 18 present. So I don't know if a legislation like this right now would trigger a response from the legislature or not, but you know, the Clean Indoor Air Act is there to protect the public from the known harms of smoking.
Steve?
I don't disagree with this, but I think it would behoove us to wait until after this session to make any movement on this issue. It's not a problem as it is.
Okay.
I mean, people vape inside for sure.
You do? Really?
Yeah, oh yeah. Some people do, yeah.
I didn't know that.
I haven't seen anybody do it in this building, but I guess technically it's legal. I do want to discourage that, but I also don't think we need, it's not an urgent issue that we need to take up right now.
The last thing I wanted to say was I really appreciate our city manager and our attorney's work on behalf of SB 142. I wrote an opinion for myself, and then I sat in on the hearing, and it was really hard not to get angry. And because what was said about our town and our city manager and the misrepresentation that occurred. And so I just wanted to tell the citizens that what it is, it's a bill to totally redo the way that our impact fees are managed within the state. Right now, cities that have high growth are allowed to have impact fees. We have 7 of them in our city, and they pay for the growth. Growth is paid for to hook up to water, sewer, parks, I think, is roads, so that the citizens that live in the city don't pay for someone to move into town and then have to pay for their hookups and all that. And so our Senator Keith Regier wrote a bill that would have taken the oversight to our Department of Commerce to do all of the management of it. We would have then given them 5% of our administrative fees that we collect to them to do this, and it would have taken away our local control as a city council to actually approve the fee increases. Would have required the audits and the engineering reports that we already do by outside consultants to be done by outside consultants. And most startlingly to me, if someone were suing the city, the taxpayers would be paying for that lawsuit. And then in addition to that, the timelines for completing capital projects were greatly reduced, so that while we're normally trying to gather money from anywhere we can to get big projects completed, there would be a shorter period of time to get those projects completed until we had to refund the money to whoever the property owner was at the time that it was collected. So we couldn't hold it for 5 or 10 years. It might have to go back within 3 years. And so the whole bill was pretty much spoken against by Belgrade, Billings, us, trying to think of what other cities were involved, but quite a few. And then the county representative was very articulate about why it wouldn't work within the counties, and why impact fees are so important to keep communities that are growing in place. And I guess the bottom line is, if these new standards were too difficult to meet, municipalities might not be able to meet them, so they would have to eliminate impact fees, which would mean that the citizens that live in the town would be paying for the growth. And so it was really disturbing to go through it all and see it, but really you guys did a wonderful job, so thank you. And I remember when Dan Weinberg was our senator, and after he was finished, he said half of his job was defeating bad bills. And so if the citizens are interested in participating in that process, I think the committee is the Senate Local Government Committee. They still have not deliberated on whether or not they'll send that bill forward to the Senate as a whole, but they probably could still receive public comment from citizens saying, please vote no on SB 142. So did I capture everything that you think was in that? Yeah. I mean, it's good to come up with new ideas, but sometimes these ideas just are not going to work. So anyways, I just wanted the citizens to know that that's an important one to speak out on.
Thanks, Rebecca. Anything further from staff? With that, I think we're adjourned. Thanks so much. I may have.